Rex's furious barking shattered the silence of the mountain forest. Snow exploded beneath his paws as he lunged toward a massive rock, teeth bared, eyes burning with panic. "Rex, stop!" Officer Mark shouted, but the K9 didn't stop. He dug harder, faster, his claws scraping ice until blood streaked the white ground. Something in his tone, something desperate, made Mark's stomach twist. This wasn't the sound of a dog finding danger. It was the sound of a soul begging to be heard. The other officers laughed nervously, but then Rex howled, a deep, haunting cry that froze everyone in place. Moments later, they moved the rock, and what they saw beneath it made every single man drop to his knees in silence. Before we start, make sure to hit like, share, and subscribe. And really, I'm curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. The forest was cloaked in white silence, every branch heavy with snow that sparkled beneath the pale morning sun. Officer Mark trudged through the frozen path, his breath forming small clouds in the crisp air. Beside him walked Rex, his loyal German Shepherd K9 partner, steps steady, eyes alert. The two had worked side by side for nearly 5 years, partners, friends, and in many ways family. Out here in the wild quiet of the mountains, they relied on each other more than anything else. "Another quiet day, huh, buddy?" Mark said, glancing down. Rex lifted his head slightly, his brown eyes gleaming with awareness. His breath puffed in rhythm with the cold wind, each exhale forming a mist that vanished as quickly as it appeared. Mark smiled faintly. He'd learned long ago that quiet days were rare blessings, until they weren't. They were part of a small patrol unit assigned to check the northern ridge after reports of hikers gone missing the previous week. Most believed the victims had gotten lost in the storm and perished, but the department wasn't giving up. Even if hope was thin, Mark knew Rex didn't operate on hope. He operated on instinct. The snow crunched under their boots as they moved deeper into the forest. Tall pines stood like sentinels on both sides, their shadows long and solemn. Mark occasionally radioed the other officers spread out across the area. Static crackled back, followed by brief confirmations, nothing found yet. Rex, however, moved differently. His nose twitched constantly, ears flicking toward every distant sound. A gust of icy wind swept through, carrying with it the faint howl of something far away, maybe a wolf, maybe just the mountain itself. Mark tightened his coat, rubbing his gloved hands together. "Let's make one more pass around the lower trail," he murmured. Rex responded with a low bark, tail flicking once before he pressed forward. Moments like these reminded Mark of how extraordinary his partner was. He'd seen Rex find lost hikers buried under avalanches, detect explosives hidden deep in cargo crates, and even locate a missing child in a storm that nearly blinded everyone else. Yet every time Rex succeeded, he acted as though it was just another duty, a job to do, a life to save. As the pair descended toward a clearing, Mark glanced up at the ridge where sunlight met shadow. He didn't know it yet, but this routine patrol was about to uncover something that would haunt and humble everyone who witnessed it. And it would all start with Rex stopping dead in his tracks. Rex froze mid-stride, his paws pressed into the snow, tail stiff, ears locked forward. Mark stopped instantly, recognizing the change. This wasn't curiosity, this was alert. "What is it, boy?" he asked softly, scanning the trees. The forest around them had gone eerily still, even the wind holding its breath. Only the faint rustle of falling snowflakes broke the silence. Rex's nose twitched rapidly, his body lowering as if ready to pounce. Then, without warning, he lunged toward a cluster of rocks near the base of a pine slope. His deep bark shattered the calm, echoing through the woods. "Rex, heel!" Mark commanded, but the German Shepherd didn't listen. He barked again, louder, faster, each sound carrying urgency rather than aggression. Mark jogged after him, snow crunching under his boots. "Easy, buddy. What's wrong?" Rex circled a large, uneven boulder partially buried in ice, barking relentlessly. His claws scraped at the snow near its edge, tossing white powder into the air. Mark frowned. It wasn't like Rex to false alert, especially not this intensely. He crouched beside the dog, placing a steadying hand on his harness. "Calm down, Rex, show me." The K9 paused for only a second, then pressed his nose against the rock, whining as if begging Mark to understand. His breath fogged the stone surface before he backed up and barked again, more desperate this time. Mark looked around. The forest floor was untouched. No footprints except theirs, no blood, no debris. Yet something about Rex's behavior sent a chill crawling up his spine. He reached for his radio. Unit 4 to command, we may have something. Requesting nearby teams to converge on my location. Coordinates to follow. Static crackled before a voice replied, "Copy that, Unit 4. What's the situation?" Mark hesitated, glancing at Rex, who continued barking at the rock. "I'm not sure," he admitted. "But Rex is reacting strong. Could be something buried." Within minutes, 2 officers arrived, their flashlights cutting through the fading daylight. They exchanged confused glances as Rex refused to stop. "He's never wrong, is he?" one muttered. Mark shook his head. "Not once." One of the officers knelt, brushing away snow near the boulder's base. "Doesn't look like much," he said. But then, a faint metallic glimmer flashed beneath the icy surface. Mark's heart skipped. Rex's barking intensified as if shouting, "There! Right there!" Mark straightened slowly, eyes narrowing. The cold suddenly felt heavier, sharper. Whatever was hidden beneath that rock had caught Rex's attention for a reason, and instinct told Mark this was no ordinary discovery. The moment the metallic glint appeared, the atmosphere shifted. The air grew heavier, colder, and even the forest seemed to hold its breath. Rex's barking echoed through the trees, bouncing off the frozen trunks like a warning. Mark knelt again, brushing snow away with his gloved hands. The glimmer vanished beneath a new layer of frost, as if the ground itself didn't want to reveal its secret. "Easy, Rex," Mark murmured, his tone calm but tense. The dog was trembling, not in fear but in fierce determination. His eyes locked on the rock as he barked in bursts, stopping only to sniff and scratch again. One of the officers, Alvarez, frowned. "Maybe it's just a piece of metal debris. Could have fallen off a hiker's gear or an old vehicle." Mark didn't answer. He'd worked with Rex long enough to know the difference between curiosity and distress. This was something deeper. "No," he said finally, his voice low. "Rex doesn't act like this for junk metal." The wind howled softly through the pines, carrying faint flakes of snow into the clearing. Alvarez and another officer exchanged uneasy glances. The sound of Rex's claws scraping the ice felt almost rhythmic, like a heartbeat buried under the snow. Mark's stomach tightened. He radioed command again. "Unit 4 to base. We're investigating an anomaly. Possible evidence under the rock. Send a forensic team just in case." "Copy that," came the reply, but Mark barely heard it. His focus remained on Rex. The K9 had stopped barking for a moment, now sniffing with short, agitated breaths. He paced in small circles, tail rigid, eyes darting from the rock to Mark as if urging him to move faster. Alvarez sighed. "You really think there's something under there?" Mark nodded slowly. Rex has found lost hikers buried under avalanches before, people no one else could detect. If he says there's something here, there is. A quiet dread spread through the group. The snow underfoot felt softer, less stable, and when Alvarez stepped closer to the boulder, a faint hollow echo responded beneath his boots. Everyone froze. Mark crouched again and pressed his ear to the icy surface. Beneath the solid crust there was silence, yet something about it felt wrong. The kind of silence that hides truth rather than peace. He looked up at his team. "Get shovels," he ordered. As they began clearing snow, Rex grew even more restless. He barked sharply, lunged, and began digging beside the rock with frantic energy. The officers worked beside him, their breaths heavy, faces tense. "Careful," Mark warned, his eyes narrowing as the snow thinned near the metallic spot. "We don't know what's under there." The last scoop of snow slid away, revealing what looked like a frozen zipper edge buried in the ice. For a moment, no one moved. Then, Mark whispered almost to himself, "That's fabric." Rex whimpered softly, lowering his head as if sensing the gravity of what they were about to uncover. The forest grew utterly still once more, and Mark realized this was only the beginning. The zipper glinted faintly beneath the frost, catching the beam of Mark's flashlight. His pulse quickened. He knelt closer, brushing away more snow until the outline of fabric appeared, frozen, torn, and half buried under the rock's edge. The air felt heavier now, each breath a cloud of white mist. Rex stood beside him, muscles tense, eyes fixed on the spot like a soldier awaiting orders. Mark exhaled slowly. "All right, easy, boy. You did good." He glanced at the others. "We're treating this as a potential evidence site. No one touches anything without gloves." Alvarez nodded, signaling one of the younger officers to mark the perimeter. Bright orange tape cut through the pale snow as they formed a loose boundary around the area. The radio crackled with updates from other teams, but Mark tuned them out. His attention was locked on the strange fabric now emerging from the ice. It wasn't just any material. It looked like the corner of a backpack, frayed and stiff from weeks in the cold. Mark's gut twisted. Could be from a missing hiker, he muttered. But even as he said it, the thought didn't sit right. There was something unsettling about the way Rex kept pacing, whining softly as if he wanted to dig deeper. Mark placed his hand on the dog's back. "What are you trying to tell me, partner?" Rex's breathing quickened, his nose darting along the rock's edge. He pressed his snout into a narrow gap beneath the boulder and barked twice, sharp and urgent. Alvarez crouched beside Mark. "There's space under there," he said, peering into the small opening. "Could be a crevice or something buried intentionally." Mark's jaw tightened. "Get the thermal scanner," he ordered. Within minutes, one of the officers returned with the handheld device. Mark aimed it at the base of the rock. The screen flickered, then displayed faint traces of heat variation beneath the surface. It wasn't much, but it was enough to raise every hair on his neck. "Something's down there," he whispered. The officers exchanged nervous glances. "Could be an animal," one offered. "Something that crawled in and froze." "Or it could be someone," Mark countered quietly. "Someone who never made it out." The wind whistled through the trees, scattering powdery snow across their boots. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Mark gave a decisive nod. "We start digging. Carefully. No sudden movements that could cause a collapse." The men grabbed shovels and began to work methodically, breaking the surface layer of ice. The rhythmic clinks of metal against rock echoed through the clearing. Rex stayed beside Mark, watching every motion with unwavering focus. As the snow thinned and the dark gap widened, a faint smell began to seep out. A cold, earthy scent mixed with something older, something that didn't belong in the living world. Mark's grip tightened on his shovel. He didn't know what they were about to find, but he knew one thing for certain. Rex hadn't led them here by accident. The first few inches of snow came off easily, revealing the top of the torn backpack Mark had seen. Its fabric was faded blue, stretched and stiff from the cold. Rex hovered over it, whining in short bursts, his breath steaming in the frigid air. Mark pulled a pair of gloves tighter around his hands and motioned for Alvarez to pass the flashlight. The beam cut through the frost, bouncing off the backpack's zipper. "Let's see what you found, partner," Mark whispered. With slow, deliberate movements, he brushed the ice away. The zipper was jammed, frozen shut. He tugged once, twice, then with a brittle crack it slid open. Inside lay fragments of a life lost to winter, a cracked phone, an ID card too faded to read, and a small piece of red fabric that looked out of place. Rex barked suddenly, startling the other officers. His nose dove into the snow near Mark's boots, digging furiously again, ignoring the open bag. "What is it, boy?" Mark asked. The K9 didn't answer, only kept scratching until his paw hit something metallic again. The faint clink echoed like a whisper from beneath the ground. Alvarez leaned closer. "That's the same sound from earlier," he muttered. He brushed away the snow, and soon a narrow strip of rusted metal appeared. It wasn't natural, it was shaped thin, almost like part of a tool or a piece of equipment. Mark's brow furrowed. "This doesn't belong out here." Rex began pacing again, nose to the ground, tracing an invisible line from the boulder toward a cluster of nearby pines. His tail stood straight, his breathing quick and focused. "He's tracking something," Mark said under his breath. Something connected. The officers followed the trail Rex created, watching him stop near a hollow in the snow about 10 feet away. He barked once, low and steady, then pawed at the ground. Mark joined him, scraping away the top layer. Beneath it was another clue, a faded scrap of blue denim torn at the edge as though ripped in struggle. A quiet unease spread among the group. "Looks like someone was here before the storm," Alvarez murmured. "But why didn't we find this earlier?" Mark's eyes moved from the fabric to Rex. The dog's ears twitched and a low growl rumbled from his chest. "Because no one was looking in the right place," Mark replied. The snowfall thickened again, flakes spiraling down like ash from the gray sky. Rex's growl softened into a whimper as he pressed his paw against the rock one last time. The faint metal beneath glimmered again, barely visible under the frost. Mark's gut twisted. "Call in the excavation team," he ordered. "We're not leaving until we find out what's under here." The wind moaned through the trees as if answering him. Somewhere deep beneath that rock, hidden by ice and silence, a story was waiting, one that Rex had already begun to uncover. The digging had gone on for nearly 20 minutes, and still the cold ground refused to give up its secret. The forest was utterly still now. Only the rhythmic scrape of shovels and Rex's heavy panting broke the silence. Mark's gloves were stiff with frost as he worked beside his team, carving through layers of packed snow and ice. The metallic sound from beneath had faded, replaced by something softer, something buried deeper. "Careful," Mark warned, his breath misting in front of him. "We don't want to damage whatever's under there." Alvarez nodded, using the edge of his shovel to lift another frozen chunk aside. Rex stood close, tail rigid, his eyes never leaving the dark hollow forming beneath the rock. His whines came low and steady now, less urgent, more sorrowful. Then Alvarez stopped. "Sir," he said quietly, "you might want to see this." Mark stepped forward, crouching beside him. Beneath the ice was something pale and smooth. At first he thought it was stone, but as his light moved across it, he saw the curve of fabric and the dull glint of a metal clasp. Mark's heart sank. "That's a backpack strap," he murmured. "Keep digging." The team worked faster, but with more care now. Each layer revealed more clues. A second strap, a cracked piece of plastic, a faded patch sewn with initials. Then, as Alvarez brushed away the last crust of ice, a small hand emerged, frozen still, the skin pale against the snow. Everyone froze. No one spoke. Even Rex went silent, his ears flattening as he let out a low, mournful whimper. Mark swallowed hard, the breath catching in his throat. "Step back," he said softly, his voice tight. He crouched beside the small form, brushing away the snow with his glove. The hand was tiny, too small to belong to an adult. Beside it lay the outline of a body curled inward, wrapped tightly in an oversized coat. One of the officers whispered, "Dear God." The forest seemed to absorb the words, the weight of the moment pressing down on every heart present. Mark could barely move. He'd seen tragedy before, but this was something else. The positioning was protective, almost gentle. Whoever it was had been shielding something, or someone. Mark noticed another shape within the coat's folds. Trembling, he leaned closer and lifted a corner of the fabric. A second, smaller outline rested within the first. A child, no more than 5 or 6, held tightly against the adult's chest, both preserved by the ice. For a long time, no one spoke. Snowflakes drifted silently through the clearing, landing on the still forms like fragile blessings. Mark stood slowly, his throat tight. "Get the coroner team," he whispered, "and get a blanket for Rex." As the others moved, Rex lay beside the frozen figures, resting his head on the snow. His soft whine broke the silence. In that moment, Mark understood Rex hadn't found evidence. He'd found love trapped forever beneath the ice. For a long time, no one spoke. The forest stood in frozen silence as if nature itself was mourning. Mark's breath trembled in the cold air while he stared at the heartbreaking sight before him. A mother and her child, locked in eternal embrace beneath the snow. The stillness was unbearable. Rex stayed by their side, his body lowered to the ground, tail resting flat, eyes reflecting a quiet sadness only animals seemed to understand. Mark forced himself to move. His hands shook as he reached for the radio clipped to his vest. "Unit 4 to command," he said, voice low but steady. "We've located 2 victims. Looks like a female adult and 1 child, both frozen under the rock formation. Requesting coroner team, forensics, and emergency support. Coordinates transmitting now." The radio crackled before the dispatcher's voice came through, tense and quiet. "Copy that, Unit 4. Confirm, 2 victims, status deceased?" Mark hesitated, glancing back at the still figures. "Confirmed," he said, the word catching in his throat. Alvarez exhaled shakily and took a step back. "How long do you think they've been here?" he asked quietly. Mark shook his head. "Hard to say. The cold preserved them. Could be weeks." His gaze dropped to the small hand clutching the edge of the woman's coat. Even through the frost, he could see the desperate tenderness in that gesture, the final act of protection. The other officers busied themselves setting up perimeter lights and photographing the scene, their movements slow and deliberate. The hum of equipment filled the still air, but none of them spoke much. Every sound felt wrong, intrusive. Rex had stopped whining now. Instead, he sat silently, head tilted slightly, eyes never leaving the two shapes in the snow. Mark walked over and knelt beside him, resting a gloved hand on his back. "You did good, buddy," he whispered. "You found them." Rex blinked slowly, his breath forming small clouds in the cold. He leaned gently against Mark's leg, as if grounding both of them in that unbearable moment. In the distance, the faint wail of sirens began to echo through the trees. The backup was on its way. The sound grew louder, but to Mark it felt hollow. Too late for saving, too soon for forgetting. As the flashing red and blue lights cut through the forest haze, Mark looked up toward the gray sky. "Let's bring them home," he murmured. Rex's ears twitched, his gaze lifting toward the approaching lights. For the first time in hours, he wagged his tail, slow, small but certain, like he knew that their mission wasn't over yet. By the time the coroner team arrived, the day had already begun to fade. The sunlight, weak and colorless, slipped through the trees like ghostly ribbons. Emergency lights flickered against the snow, as the small clearing turned into a full-scale recovery scene. Mark stood beside Rex, watching silently as the forensic specialists unpacked their tools. The cold bit deeper now, but no one seemed to notice. Every officer present felt the same mix of awe and sorrow. "Clear the perimeter," Mark instructed quietly. No unnecessary movement around the site. His voice was calm but carried the weight of command. Alvarez nodded, ushering the junior officers back behind the marker tape. The sound of generators hummed faintly in the background as heaters were set up to soften the ice for excavation. Rex sat at the edge of the site, his eyes following every movement. Even with strangers crowding the area, he stayed still, ears alert, tail resting motionless in the snow. Mark crouched beside him, running a hand over his back. "You stay close, okay? You earned this, buddy." The German shepherd blinked once, then fixed his gaze back on the rock as if refusing to look away from the truth he had found. The lead coroner, Dr. Patel, approached Mark. "We'll need to lift the rock slightly to reach them safely," he said. "There's a hollow space underneath. Looks like it formed naturally." Mark nodded grimly. "Do it carefully. We don't want to disturb anything." Two technicians secured ropes and a small hydraulic lift around the boulder. The machinery groaned softly as the rock began to shift. Snow tumbling down its sides in shimmering waves, the air filled with the low rumble of stone grinding against ice. Then, with a dull thud, the rock tilted just enough to reveal the hollow beneath. A hush fell over everyone. The space was deeper than expected, a narrow cavity like a shelter carved by desperation. The woman's arm was visible now, draped protectively around the child's small frame. Her coat had frozen stiff, still wrapped around the boy. The image hit Mark like a punch to the chest. Even after death, she had been shielding him. "Start documentation," Dr. Patel instructed softly. Cameras clicked. Gloves brushed snow away inch by inch. Every movement was reverent, slow, almost sacred. Rex whimpered, taking a hesitant step forward before Mark gently stopped him. "It's okay, boy. They're in good hands now." But deep down, Mark knew Rex understood the gravity of what they had uncovered. This wasn't just a discovery. It was a story of love stronger than fear, preserved by winter itself. When the team finally began to lift the bodies out, no one spoke. The forest remained silent, except for the soft rustle of wind through the trees and the distant sound of Rex's quiet breathing. Mark looked at the small bundle being carried toward the ambulance, and a single thought echoed in his mind. They had come here seeking life, but found the purest act of it instead. The forest had grown dark by the time the team reached the hollow's deepest point. Floodlights cast long, cold beams across the snow, their glow reflecting off the icy surfaces like pale fire. Mark stood beside Rex, who hadn't taken his eyes off the opening since the rock had been lifted. Every breath from the dog came slow, heavy, and deliberate, as though he sensed the final truth waiting below. Dr. Patel's voice broke the silence. "We're going to remove the last layer of ice now." His tone was calm but reverent. Two technicians knelt carefully, chiseling through the frost. Each movement echoed like thunder in the still forest. Slowly, the icy crust began to crack. Mark's flashlight trembled slightly in his hand as he leaned closer. With one final tap, the ice gave way. Beneath it lay a figure wrapped in thick fabric, an adult positioned protectively over something smaller. The child's tiny face was hidden in the crook of the woman's arm. Time had frozen them together in their final moment. Rex whimpered softly, taking a step forward. His ears folded back as if the sight was too much even for him. Mark swallowed hard, his throat tightening. He had seen death before, but never like this. There was no violence here, no cruelty, only sacrifice. One of the officers muttered, "She must have covered the kid when the storm hit." His voice cracked mid-sentence. No one replied. The truth was too heavy to carry aloud. Mark crouched beside the bodies, brushing away the last of the snow with gloved hands. He noticed something clutched tightly in the woman's frozen grip, a photograph half torn but still visible. It showed a man in military uniform standing beside her and the same small boy who now rested in her arms. A family, smiling in the warmth of summer. He exhaled shakily, whispering, "She was trying to get him home." Dr. Patel gently placed a hand on his shoulder. "We'll take care of them, officer. You did right bringing them out." But Mark shook his head slowly. "It wasn't me. It was Rex." The coroner's team began preparing to move the bodies, wrapping them carefully as if afraid to disturb their peace. Rex sat back watching in silence. His eyes followed every motion, his body still as stone. When the child's small mitten slipped from the blanket, Rex lowered his head, nose touching it gently before letting out a quiet sigh. The snowfall began again, soft, delicate flakes drifting down like tears from the sky. The light caught them as they landed on the still forms, sparkling faintly before melting into nothing. Mark stood tall, shoulders heavy with sorrow. "Let's bring them home," he said softly. And as the stretchers were lifted toward the waiting vehicles, Rex turned his gaze back toward the hollow. The rock that had hidden tragedy for so long now stood bare beneath the moonlight, a silent monument to love that refused to die. The coroner's van pulled away slowly, its red taillights fading into the swirl of falling snow. Mark stood motionless beside the clearing, his breath shallow, watching the last glimmers of light disappear. The others began packing their gear, but the forest still felt haunted by what they'd uncovered. Rex sat quietly beside him, eyes following the trail until it vanished into the darkness. Dr. Patel approached, clipboard in hand, his expression grim. "We finished the preliminary examination," he said softly. "You should hear this." Mark turned toward him, his face pale from both cold and dread. "Go ahead." Patel sighed, removing his gloves. The woman wasn't caught by surprise. She had built a small barrier of branches near that rock, likely to block the wind. She survived for a while, maybe 2 days. But the storm must have worsened. When she realized help wouldn't come, she covered the boy completely under her coat. Mark swallowed hard. "She knew she wouldn't make it." "Yes," Patel nodded, voice heavy. Her body shielded him from the cold. But that's not all. There were faint bruises on her hands and scratches on the rock's inner surface. She tried digging herself out after it collapsed. He paused, meeting Mark's eyes. She didn't stop until her last breath. Mark felt his chest tighten. His mind replayed the scene. The torn backpack, the ripped denim, the way she'd curled around the boy. He could almost see her struggling through the blizzard, stumbling toward that rock, believing it would protect them. "What about the child?" he asked quietly. Dr. Patel hesitated, glancing down at his notes. "The boy may have been alive for hours after she passed. Her body temperature kept him insulated long enough to preserve his vitals. When she finally froze, the warmth was gone. He likely fell asleep in her arms." Mark turned away, fighting the lump rising in his throat. The air felt suffocating, the tragedy too vast to grasp. Rex whimpered softly, pressing his head against Mark's leg as if sensing his pain. Patel continued gently. "The items we found in her backpack, those weren't random. She had food rations, water, a small flashlight, and a map. She wasn't lost, officer. She was running." Mark's brow furrowed. "Running? From what?" Patel exhaled. "We don't know yet. But judging from the terrain she crossed, she wasn't wandering. She was heading toward civilization, maybe trying to reach help for the child." The weight of her courage settled on Mark's shoulders like the snow around them. "She didn't die afraid," he murmured. "She died fighting to save him." Patel nodded slowly. "That's exactly what your dog sensed. Not danger, not death. Life, what was left of it." Mark looked down at Rex, who sat silently in the snow, eyes glistening in the dim light. "Then he didn't just find them," Mark whispered. "He honored them." The next morning, a soft light filtered through the hospital windows as snow continued to fall outside. Mark sat in the waiting area, Rex lying at his feet, both of them still carrying the weight of the night before. The world outside moved on. Cars passed, nurses hurried by, but for them, time had slowed to a heavy silence. Dr. Patel entered the hallway, his expression calmer now. "We've identified them," he said gently. The woman's name was Claire Miller, age 32. The child, her son, was Evan, 6 years old. They'd been reported missing from a small village 30 miles north. The storm hit before search teams could reach them. Mark nodded slowly, his throat tight. "She tried to get him to safety," he murmured. "Yes," Patel replied. Their car was found a few miles away, stuck in the snow. It seems she carried him on foot through the blizzard. When the winds grew too strong, she found shelter under that rock and did everything she could to keep him warm. She wrapped her coat around him and held him until the end. Rex let out a faint whine, as if understanding every word. Mark reached down, gently scratching behind his ear. "You found them," he said softly. "You brought them home." Patel continued. "Her husband's in the lobby. He's been searching for them for weeks. He refused to stop even after the storm passed." Mark's chest ached. "Does he know?" Patel nodded. "He asked to see you and the dog." Moments later, a tall man stepped into the room, his face pale from grief. His hands trembled as he clutched the same photo they'd found in the snow, the one of the three of them smiling together. When his eyes fell on Rex, tears filled them instantly. "This is him?" the man whispered. "The dog who found my family." Mark nodded. Rex wouldn't give up until he uncovered them. He knew they were there. The man knelt before the German shepherd, his voice breaking. "Thank you," he said, his hand trembling as he stroked Rex's head. "Thank you for giving me a chance to say goodbye." Rex remained still, his gaze gentle and calm as if offering silent comfort. Mark looked away, his own vision blurring. For a long moment no one spoke. Outside, the snowfall softened and sunlight finally pierced through the clouds. Mark realized that while tragedy had stolen 2 lives, Rex had restored something just as powerful: truth, closure, and peace. The following days passed in a quiet blur. Snow still blanketed the forest, but the area where the discovery had been made now stood empty, a hollow space surrounded by silence and orange tape fluttering in the wind. Mark found himself returning there often, not out of duty, but out of something deeper. Guilt, perhaps, or the lingering ache of empathy. Rex always walked beside him, paws leaving soft impressions in the snow that the wind quickly erased. Standing by the rock, Mark exhaled slowly. "You knew, didn't you?" he whispered, glancing at his partner. Rex tilted his head, ears flicking as if understanding the words. There was no bark this time, no growl, just a deep, calm stillness in his eyes. He knelt, brushing a patch of snow from the frozen ground. The world felt too still, too respectful to disturb. "We're supposed to protect the living," he murmured. "But sometimes we only find the truth after it's too late." His voice cracked at the edges. Rex stepped closer, pressing his head against Mark's shoulder. It was a small gesture, but in that frozen silence, it meant everything. Back at the station, reports had been filed, news outlets had picked up the story, and investigators had praised Rex's remarkable instincts. But Mark avoided the cameras and attention. For him, it wasn't a moment of triumph. It was a reminder of life's fragility and the unseen pain carried by those who go unnoticed until tragedy strikes. At night, he'd catch Rex pacing near the door, restless. Every time the wind howled outside, the dog would lift his head, ears twitching as if expecting another call for help that would never come. Mark would sigh and pat the floor beside him. "It's over, buddy. You did what no one else could." Rex would settle down, resting his head on Mark's boots, eyes half closed yet still alert, like a soldier who never truly stands down. A few days later, Mark received a small envelope from the Miller family. Inside was a handwritten note from Claire's husband. "You didn't just bring them home, you brought peace to all of us. Tell your dog he gave a grieving father a reason to breathe again." Mark folded the note carefully and slipped it into his jacket pocket. As he looked down at Rex sleeping peacefully by his feet, he whispered, "You see, buddy? You didn't just save lives, you healed them." Outside, the first light of dawn spread across the snow, painting it gold. For the first time since that day, Mark smiled. The forest wasn't haunted anymore, it was honored. A week later, the town gathered under a gray sky heavy with snow clouds. The funeral was held at a small hillside cemetery overlooking the valley, silent, windless, and blanketed in white. Mark stood among the rows of mourners, his uniform pressed, his expression solemn. Beside him sat Rex, calm and steady, his leash loose, his eyes fixed on the two caskets resting side by side. The sound of the priest's voice drifted softly over the crowd. "No greater love exists," he said, "than the love of a mother who gives her life to protect her child." His words hung in the cold air, and for a long moment no one moved. Snowflakes began to fall, slow at first, then steadier, like nature itself was mourning. The father stood at the front, his trembling hands clutching a bouquet of white lilies. His eyes were red, his face pale, yet he stood tall as he looked down at the smaller casket. "She promised she'd keep him safe," he whispered. "And she did." Mark felt the words pierce through him. He reached down and rested a hand on Rex's back. The dog didn't move, but his ears flicked, his gaze unwavering. When the family stepped forward to place flowers on the graves, Rex followed without hesitation. The crowd parted instinctively, watching as the K9 approached the caskets. He paused between them, lowered his head, and gently placed his paw on the ground. A silent salute, a gesture of respect only a soul as loyal as his could give. Gasps rippled through the mourners. The father covered his mouth, tears streaming freely now. Mark swallowed hard, blinking rapidly as emotion swelled in his chest. In that moment, the entire town understood that Rex hadn't just been a police dog. He had been the voice of the voiceless, the one who refused to let their story end in silence. After the final prayer, the caskets were lowered into the earth. The soft thud of soil striking wood echoed through the air like a heartbeat fading away. The crowd dispersed slowly, leaving only Mark, Rex, and the grieving father behind. The man approached them quietly. "I'll never forget what you and your partner did," he said, his voice raw. "You gave them dignity. You gave me closure." Mark nodded, unable to speak. As the man walked away, Rex let out one soft whine and sat facing the graves, his tail still, his heart heavy, and as snow fell gently over the burial ground, it felt less like sorrow and more like peace finally settling in. 2 weeks later, the police department's training ground was unusually crowded. Officers stood in neat rows, their breath rising in clouds against the chill morning air. The local news crew had set up cameras, their lenses glinting under a weak winter sun. In the center of the courtyard stood Mark and Rex, side by side as always. Rex's tail flicked once, his posture alert but calm. He didn't understand the reason for the crowd, only that something important was happening. The police chief stepped forward, holding a small velvet box. His voice carried over the assembled officers. "Today we honor not just a K9 officer, but a symbol of unwavering loyalty and compassion." He looked at Rex, then at Mark. When every tool failed, when no scanner or device could detect what lay hidden beneath that mountain, this dog's heart succeeded where technology could not. A murmur of emotion rippled through the crowd. Mark kept his gaze steady, though pride and sadness warred inside him. He remembered that night, the howling wind, the heartbreak in the snow, and Rex's refusal to leave the site until the truth was found. The chief continued, "Rex's actions didn't just solve a mystery. They restored dignity to a mother and child. They reminded us what true service looks like, selfless, instinctive, pure." He opened the box, revealing a gleaming silver medal etched with the words, "For bravery and compassion." Mark crouched beside his partner as the chief pinned the ribbon to Rex's harness. The German shepherd blinked up at him, tail wagging faintly. Applause erupted, filling the air, echoing off the station walls. But amid the cheers, Rex stayed perfectly still, eyes on Mark as if awaiting his next command. Mark smiled faintly, whispering, "You earned it, buddy." Reporters approached for photos, snapping images of the stoic K9 against the snow-dusted backdrop. But the moment that touched everyone came unexpectedly, when Rex lifted his head and let out a soft, echoing bark. It wasn't loud, just enough to break the silence as though acknowledging the honor in his own quiet way. The chief chuckled. "He knows what this means," he said warmly. Mark nodded, eyes glistening. "Yeah, he always does." And as the crowd applauded again, the camera flashes caught a single, timeless image, a loyal K9 standing tall beside his handler, his medal shining in the morning light like the heart of a hero. A month later, winter began to loosen its grip on the forest. The heavy snow that once buried every trail had softened into glistening patches of ice, and faint hints of green peeked through the white. Mark stood once again at the same ridge where it had all begun. The wind carried the scent of pine and melting frost. Beside him, Rex sat quietly, his harness polished, his metal glinting faintly in the weak sunlight. Mark gazed down at the valley below, where the searchlights had once burned through the night. "You remember this place, huh?" he murmured. Rex's ears twitched at his voice, his steady eyes scanning the clearing where the rock still stood, now marked by a small wooden cross adorned with two names, Claire and Evan Miller. A silence settled between them, comfortable and heavy with memory. Mark crouched beside his partner, running a gloved hand through Rex's fur. "You changed everything, buddy," he whispered. "You turned tragedy into truth. You gave a family their peace back." Rex lowered his head, pressing it gently against Mark's arm, as if acknowledging the weight of those words. A faint breeze stirred, scattering loose snow like glitter across the ground. The forest, once cold and haunting, now felt alive again, peaceful, forgiving. Somewhere above, a hawk cried out, its sound echoing across the valley. Mark smiled faintly. "You know," he said softly, "they say dogs can sense more than we can. Things beyond life and death. Maybe you weren't barking at danger that day. Maybe you were calling out to the souls who still needed to be found." Rex blinked, his eyes reflecting the sunlight, golden and unwavering. He let out a quiet, content sigh before lying down beside the small memorial. Mark watched him for a moment, then reached into his pocket and pulled out the letter from Claire's husband. He unfolded it slowly, the words smudged but still clear. "Tell the dog he's my angel." Mark smiled through the ache in his chest. "You hear that, Rex?" he said softly. "You're someone's angel." The wind whispered through the pines like a gentle reply. Mark straightened, taking one last look at the mountains before turning back toward the path. "Come on, partner," he said. "We've got more people out there who still need us." Rex rose, tail swaying once, then fell in step beside him. Together they walked away through the thinning snow, two silhouettes fading into the golden light of a new day. Narration, closing line. Some heroes don't wear badges or uniforms. Some simply listen to the silence and answer it.